Ready, we're going to move into the next part of our evening. And I do encourage you to continue to send any notes that you want to Colleen, and absolutely. But right now, we're going to move into what is actually the opening event for a conference that is running tomorrow. And I think that many of you have previously been at some of our sessions over the last couple years, and will know that Mediate BC has been working hard to collaborate with both Continuing Legal Education Society of BC and with Core Conflict Resolution Society to increasingly work together to find the ways that we can have collaborative conversations about collaboration. What can we do? How can we change spaces? How can we engage in different ways? And much of that has been led to by the disruption of COVID and the opportunities to rethink how we get together and who we get together with and what those different opportunities can be. So for the last couple of years, Mediate BC's reception has looked a little different than it used to when we used to meet up and share food, which was great. But what it didn't allow was for quite the breadth of opportunity for people to join. And it also didn't allow us to have this opportunity to invite speakers from a number of different professional backgrounds, people who come from places and ways of thinking, perspectives on the world that might be different than what we bring. We have differences as mediators, but we also have some common approaches to things. And so when we have moments of reflection about our own practice, sometimes it can feel a little bit like we're talking into an echo chamber with others who have very similar thoughts. And so if you've been with us over the last couple of years, you know that we've brought in Angela Sturrett, a journalist, to speak about journalism and the ways that might inspire us to think about our work. Tamil Pennicott last year, an actor who was able to talk about from his own personal background, but also about the ways in which we view the world through the lens if we're acting. This year, again, we're looking to do something similar, to bring in some voices that we may not hear in our own conversations. And so we've invited Kari Marken and Mark Busse, and they will join me in just a moment, to talk from their backgrounds. And their backgrounds are diverse, and I'm not going to go into all of them, but they come from places of working and studying creativity, pedagogy, architecture, creation of intentional dialogue and discourse, hosting. They bring a lot of different thoughts that I think you'll hear the connections between what they do and how they think about their work and how they think about community building and what we do in our work as mediators and conflict resolution professionals. And in order to help make some of those connections, I'm inviting Julie and Robin back as well to engage in a conversation on the topic of creativity and connection, perspectives and possibilities. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our four speakers to join in conversation tonight.
Thank you, Sharon.
All right, takes a moment as I get you all.
Yeah. Boy, that was so nice to hear from Colleen, though. She really is an exceptional individual. So congratulations again, Colleen.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
And I'd like to welcome Mark and Kari to this conversation. And I was really excited. We had a chance to briefly meet earlier today and launch into some of the interesting work that you do. But I really am excited for this conversation with everyone. To hear what it is, and I don't want to introduce you because, like as Sharon said, you have done so many things, and I think that you sharing a bit about yourselves as we have this conversation will be interesting. But I know that you've been invited to talk about your different perspectives on creating inclusive spaces, and that is what Sharon said. One of the things that certainly as mediators we've thought about as we've transitioned during the pandemic to a lot of online work and hybrid work, and people still questioning what is the future of work going to look like, and meetings and conflict. So I want to invite both of you to tell me about what your experiences have been in creating inclusive spaces, especially for difficult conversations or idea generation. So when it's been really important to have those great ideas that businesses need.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
Hi, everyone.
You can hear us okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Test. Check.
Cool.
Okay.
So I think it's important before we get going, and Kari, forgive me, I'm going to do this for both of us so we can move through it, but Kari and I would like to humbly acknowledge that we are on the unceded, non-surrendered territory of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations here, the Coast Salish people, where we live. We also acknowledge our own complicity in settler occupation, and the unintended benefits of that for us as settlers, its present occupation and its violent legacy. And we, Kari and I, accept our responsibility to work actively towards supporting Indigenous sovereignty, towards a respectful relationship with the original inhabitants of the special place. And so to add action to those words, she and I will be making a donation to Indigenous Climate Action today, who is an Indigenous led organization working on climate crisis solutions.
Thank you.
Anything you want to say intro-wise, Kari? Say something clever.
Well, just building on the acknowledgement, I also always like to make a note that as an educator, there's a particular sense of responsibility and humility I have in the role I have in a position of power in a classroom to bring inclusivity into a space, guided by my own humility, but also my own walking of the walk, I guess. So one of the ways that I do that I can even do here in this room is any classroom that I teach. So I'm a teacher that's shown up in many different ways in my career, but the identity that I hold very dear when I think about gatherings in space and bringing people together is educator or teacher. And a question I often or always ask when I walk into a room, first time in with a gathering, is to say, what does this room want us to do? And because our built environments start to guide our actions, and those actions can be guided in ways that are habitual, not thought about. So I actually interrogate the space that we're in itself, almost like I'm interviewing it, like it's its own thing. And very quickly, my students in particular will say things like, it wants us to sit and be quiet, it wants us to only listen to you. I mean, different spaces are built in ways that guide our behavior. So that way we can, as a community in spaces, start to push back and say, what do we want to do differently? What agenda do we have and how we want to show up in this space? And so our community norms are actually guided by a kind of sense of resistance and reoccupation of the space as a learning environment that brings our whole bodies and aesthetic and movement into it. So one of the things I'll do in Zoom, I don't know if people want to join along, is I'll actually get everybody to push against the edges of their square and sort of feel that this is a virtual space, but this is also we've got these little squares, and then I'll say, what's it like if we all just go really close and just really stay close and stare at each other, which is somewhere along the way, a memo was sent that this is how we're supposed to show up on Zoom, but that memo was never actually sent. And what's it like if we actually sit back and bring a bit more of our body and we start to see hand gestures and see bodies in the room? And Zoom spaces tell us that we have to stay seated, but what if, we need to start to actually do this while we're chatting and talking, and just if I start doing a little bit of that moving around the space and starting to challenge these ways that people are just habitually showing up in Zoom that aren't mandated by any Zoom god, then that immediately then starts to give permission that cameras can be on, cameras can be off, you can be looking over here, you can be looking over here. And that's one way that I come at that conversation, Julie.
Wow, that is great. I think I love that idea about what is the space. I remember actually one of the first speaking engagements I did with Sharon when I was doing I just finished a practicum to become a mediator and was invited, and we were at, what is it, the Vancouver Terminal City Club. And I remember asking what it looked like because I had a sense of what it was going to be like. And I was really worried about bringing my Indigenous self into this venue that I imagined was very sort of classic old boys club, and what would that feel like? And I think it really speaks to my Indigenous way of being, which is the space really does dictate and have a presence in how we interact, and that's why land-based learning is so powerful, but also just challenging what are those norms. I love that. And so anything for you to add, Mark, on inclusivity or space or those thoughts?
Oh boy, we're diving right in, hey? Yeah, I mean, before I do, maybe I just want to mention briefly how grateful I am, I don't know, Kari is, to have even been invited here. Like we don't, this is an intimidating space. You folks, I have had a little bit of experience with what mediation is in my own life, which is not always such a good thing. Is that when you have mediation, you've met a mediator in your life, that something went wrong, but it's okay. I would say we're seeing a little bit of this right here. Kari demonstrated it actually. And so one of the things that I constantly think about when I'm designing space, hosting space, whether it's one-on-one coaching or, a festival crowd or a big workshop, even in person and really online, it's just how important setting intentions are, right? Understanding, coming together. And we've seen some of this here with really clear understanding of the purpose and value of this gathering, the meaning of why we're together, and using that to empower people. I'm always so aware. My wife is an introvert, and I have introversion tendencies, but I skew towards the external performative. Both Kari and I are very comfortable in front of people. If the light's on us, we're okay. But I have to, as a facilitator and a host, remind myself there are people in this room, I guarantee you, who would never do this and really don't want to speak up. And I really need to be gentle and about how to include them and intentional about how to include them, but also give them the gift of clarity that their voice matters, that this is an important topic, that we're going to accomplish something today, that we're going to meet that promise. And to me, that's an important part of inclusivity, because otherwise, like, why did you invite me here? I mean, I don't feel like I have a chance to speak. This is, so that for me, and that goes to also to closing, like when you shape the opening of a gathering, and as you come to the end, where did we go? How did it land? What are we going to do with this? How did we harvest this? These things for me, I spend a lot of time challenging my clients and my collaborators to wrestle with these and say, like, let's be thoughtful about how we're going to include people's voices and what we're going to do with this input.
I really appreciate that. I was thinking about that intention. I was trying to Google the name of the book, where a conflict resolution professional has written
Priya Parker,
a book.
The Art of Hosting.
Yes.
So Priya Parker.
I'll drop it in the chat.
I'll name drop Priya. So Priya Parker has been a teacher. I've workshopped under Priya directly, and so I am, an advocate. I mean, if you've read the book, and hopefully everybody here is, and please, if you haven't, go grab the book. Nothing in the book will feel unfamiliar, I predict. I don't think anybody here will be like, that seems weird, but all of it will be validating and feel so like when I was turning 50. So I met Priya in 2018, 19, right as the book came out. And then I turned 50. And so my wife said to me, you know, your friends are going to throw a party, whether you like it or not. And I just did not want a party. And I said, sure, fine. Okay, whatever. So I hosted a almost 300 person funeral, living wake, where we basically, inspired by what I gleaned from Priya's challenge to really reimagine, what does a space look like? What are these labels we use for events? Why does a birthday party have to be balloons and cake? And in the middle of, that's my wife watching comedy downstairs with headphones on. You hear that? And in the middle of this beautiful event that was very touching, I cried all the way through. She didn't even know it, the giggling one. It became a wedding vow renewal ceremony. And we restructured the entire thing, changed the promise of the entire thing, the whole shape changed. And it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. And I tap that when I'm designing spaces for people. Wait a second. It does not have to look this way. A workshop does not have to be this way. We could do a workshop in the field. We don't have to be in this container.
I love it. Robin, I've been hogging them all with my questions. So
Well, yeah, no, I mean, and yeah, thank you again so much for being here with us, because you have such different perspectives, and I think that's what we're here to think about is, how do we challenge our assumptions, and what is, what does it mean to really make space? And maybe it's not what we thought it was going in, and that even what that looks like is something to maybe unpack. Mark, picking up on one of your comments you made in your intro, you talked about being here, and even being here at Mediate BC is new. It's a new experience for you. It's something different. There's a moment of vulnerability. And I am just wondering if you, could speak a little bit to, what that can look like, how that could perhaps create space, why it's important to pay attention to those moments of vulnerability.
Well, if you hadn't noticed, am a okay, we're gonna have to tell my wife. We can hear her. Hold on a second. There's a vulnerable moment. Hold on a second.
I can also say something about that if that's helpful, just so we don't drop scripture.
It's okay. It's okay.
You're good. You're on.
No,
you're on.
Okay,
go
she's
for
good.
it.
She's got it. She sends her apologies and says hi to everybody.
Andrea.
Hi, Andrea. Hey, everybody. One of the things that's important for me, and I will be vulnerable right here, and I will own this moment actually, and I will say where I have failed as a host and as a facilitator and as a teacher and as a leader in business is the notion of psychological safety. And so I even using that phrase, sometimes I will say that to colleagues and collaborators and clients, and they're like, what? And I'm like, yeah, right. See, we need to spend time thinking about what is psychological safety. And so for me, I just not that long ago encountered an experience with a young female professional I work with, who's a skilled, licensed, impressive leader to be, and through some really what to me seemed completely innocuous and good intentioned efforts, I othered her. I othered her by pointing out certain aspects of differences between us, trying to be playful about it, and it failed. Now, I just share that just to be sort of vulnerable right here. And one of the things that I have found in the inclusive conversation, sometimes as the person with the light on me as this straight white man, first of all, I really don't like facilitating alone. If I can have a Kari in the room with me or someone else to offset my energy and my role, and we can play with archetypes and leadership roles and break that down, the gender thing, I'm all for it. But being able to name something that's uncomfortable, to own a failure on my own part, to pivot and flex when I see someone, the body language or the reaction or something change, and to kind of really be a participant in the actual energy of the room, not just that benevolent dictator who's running the show and we have a schedule, the facilitator role. I have found that actually really improves participation. People feel safer. They feel seen. Oh, this guy's willing to admit he was wrong, or he actually pointed out what that person did that was making me uncomfortable. Now I feel better about that. And so when I'm doing that, whether it's online or in person, I have found that actually ups the participation and increases the ability for me to pull ideas out of the collective genius. Kari, go ahead. You were going to share something.
I love that question, Robin. So the idea of a notion of collective meaning making is a really powerful one that guides my work when I bring folks together, is that I really believe that we should be starting group processes, in particular in education and in fields where I work. And we should be starting group processes with questions that we don't know the answer to as educators and facilitators, rather than creating processes where we are asking questions where we, as the people in positions of power in that space, we have the answers and we're trying to get everybody to come up with the right answer. So it could be that moving from novice to expert, there needs to be some basic principles or some basic ideas that we need to form a collective knowledge around before we go into the unknown question. But I really make sure that there's always a question or an invitation in either the entire design of a course or the entire shape of an event or an entire class, where I am genuinely in the meaning making experience with others in the room with me. And that is a way, especially in the academy, which can be a pretty ruthless place. That's very much a way in the academy to demonstrate not just vulnerability, but to me, the essence of what it should be. It should be a group of people fumbling around in the unknown and genuinely trying to see each other and invite each other into that meaning making. Because at the core of it, to especially now, like, people just want to be in spaces where they feel like they belong. And that belonging is such a human drive and need. And what a gift to be able to come back into versions of that again in hybrid spaces, in-person spaces, online spaces. I actually see the online spaces as much of a gift as being able to come back in person, because we now all have this literacy and knowledge of how to just be on Zoom together or make an event hybrid if somebody can't be there in person, that we just didn't have a few years ago. And I find that incredible. I find it incredible that my 86-year-old father can play games with me on Zoom every Sunday morning. And it's just amazing. But I digress. Yeah. So the not knowing, the creating spaces of not knowing, and my personal take on that is I'm usually kind of like, ooh, okay, we don't know something. What are we going to do? Like, I try to make it playful and I try to make it curious and really sparked by a desire to, like, either fuck things up or make things better or whatever, like, sort of like to just be in the troublemaking together or in the resistance together, or it just in the just making the world a more enjoyable place to show up in groups together.
Yeah, I love that. Be curious and really being present and not having those preconceived ideas, and to just be willing to be flexible and adaptive. Of course, as mediators, that's we're always trying to find commonalities and give voice to the parties, and perhaps a little bit of a pivot, but actually both of you talked, Kari, about being in a classroom. We're both talking about power dynamics and large groups, and mediation isn't always just two parties. We can have multi-party mediations or large other forms of consensus building processes, perhaps collaborative negotiations. How do you find? Do you have any thoughts about how you can build inclusivity and you can engage individuals in that sort of a larger forum?
I'm might start on
Come
that
on.
because this is one of my favorite
Go.
topics. Sorry, Mark. I just
You
have
do
to-
no, you do this all the time.
So
Go.
here's something that I love about that question. So there is a in the worlds that I'm in, I don't know what the worlds that you're in, there is a assumption that seems to permeate when a group of professionals in the realms that I work in get together. And the assumption is smaller is better. And I even just had this experience today in an email where there is a group of 120 students that get broken into two sections of the same course. And then I teach one group for 4 hours in the morning, and then I turn around and I teach the other group for 4 hours in the afternoon, and it's the same content. And I had to make a really strong case to administrators higher up that I can deliver as effective a 4-hour class if you put 120 of them in a room together. And it's for some people, it's the more comfortable group size is larger, and for some people, the more comfortable group size is smaller. So the question that I would just ask everyone to interrogate within themselves is like, if you could imagine you're hosting something, anything, and it's the ideal location, the ideal group size, the ideal topic, and the ideal age. For me, the ideal age is between 13 and 19 years old. So I love it. The ideal group size is like 300 to 500. The ideal location is a large lecture theater that I can kind of hack and play with and present from the back and present from the side and like get everybody really taking over a theater. And the ideal topic is anything, because I just love to be surrounded by a wild pack of teenagers. So when I go in dressed in like my business suit at the Sauder School of Business, and we're sitting down and we're having discussions about what good teaching or what great program design is, I'll actually stop that conversation and say, what's everybody's ideal group size? Like, I'll ask that question, and what surfaces is really interesting. For some people, it's one-on-one, and for others, it's larger groups, just to kind of shake up the idea that not for everyone, it's not harder. But if it is harder for you to think about a big group, in a math professor that I once worked with as part of my PhD research, I had 3 big case studies, and each case study was a professor or an educator who had a really creative way of describing their work. And Dr. Fokshan Lang described his teaching as fractalization. So that notion of fractals in mathematics. And so he will find the essence of what he does in a small office hours conversation, and he'll just pick out the key pieces that he knows really catalyzes that group. And he'll think, how can I just simply fractalize that to a larger group and a larger group, and do the things that you know that you do very, very well and with a lot of comfort and ease. Because as the group gets bigger, the fear of public speaking kicks in. And so you're going to have to really tap into intuition and kind of that habituated knowledge. And so just be very like, just don't try to do all the things. Just pick the things that you know in a small group are just your almost like professional intuitive wisdom. And if there's a few of those that you could imagine are just going to be with you, beside you, inside you, like you just have them, that you can fractalize to a larger group. So it is one of my favorite topics. So I'm sorry, Mark, I just went all nerdy there on you, completely took over. I even brought in like math.
You know what? While you were going off on your tangent, I pointed out for everybody that it was the PhD university professor who dropped the first F-bomb for a change. So I feel I'm fine. I have two thoughts going through my head. One is, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but if anybody has ever encountered, been trained in, or used open space technology as a framework, once you get into larger group, and it's worth, maybe Kari, could you Google open space technology, and I know there's a global org there that we could share with them, but you can empower, especially when you get into really large groups, as in the similar way that Kari was talking about, how let's ask the people who show up, right? It's the notion that the right people are going to be in the room, that the right knowledge is going to be there, that the right organization, the fractalization will self-organize into ways that make sense and matter, and that we will be able to close this and it can self-guide. I love it, and one of the things I really love about it, just tactically or as a part of the open source framework and ideology, is what we call the rule of 2 feet. And when you get into larger groups, Kari and I host together a lot, and we've done workshops, and we do every month we host large groups. We love putting people into these little clusters of 6 people or so ish, right? And if somebody isn't feeling comfortable or engaged or getting what they need from, or they've already said their thing in one room or one group, get up and move to another one. And that becomes part of the norms that particular group has manifest as the agreed to covenant that would guide its behavior. I have another thought though, and it goes back to the question, Kari, you mentioned it, which is, you and I are both big proponents. It goes to the meaning and the purpose. Like, what are we doing here? That big guiding question. Another way that I really like to use questions to, and I'm going to tie in a little bit to the inclusivity engagement thing earlier to the large group insight. And it's, I have found a secret sauce, superpower that I have figured out, and I just learned it and practiced it. It's the idea of common ground, right? Look at Julie's, something terrible is happening with Julie. It's amazing. She's like, everything's flying. It's fantastic. And but like, it's easy. It's easy to say that. Like, it's like, okay, what do we have in common that we can use to unlock whatever is hidden in this beautiful group? So one of the things that Priya taught me in person, it's not in her book, but it's a beautiful thing. And I have a protocol. If somebody reminds me, I can share with you my own version that I wrote up from memory, because she hasn't shared it anywhere. I love it. She had, how many of us? Oh my gosh. I bet there were 300 people. And we had a big space, much more the kind of space that Kari likes to be in. And she invited us to all push back, and she walked the circle. And she started to ask people questions like, is this your first time at this type of event? Please step forward. People would step forward and then step back. And we would say, and she would say something, and she would interact in popcorn style, talk to the people. What is this like for you? And what does this mean? And why are you here? Thank you. Go back. And then she would ask, how long have you traveled? People have traveled more than X miles. Please come forward. And there was this oscillation, and it got increasingly more personal, more provocative, and frankly, kind of creepy. And it was amazing. At one point she asked somebody, if you consider yourself a nerd, please step forward. So some people did, and we're like, okay, well, what does this mean? And why do you say this? And what does this look like? And right. And then they would go back, and it started to empower people in the room in a sense. Oh, there's no judgment here. I can reveal aspects of myself. Then she would say something like, if you consider yourself a troublemaker, please step forward. If you've ever been charged with a crime or been in jail, please step forward. It just, like, the trust level was shazam. And all of a sudden this group was just willing and ready. Now everybody crossed the room and sit in an entirely different place in this space, and using motion to create energy and connectivity. It revealed so much common ground. It opened up so much dialogue and potential. The creativity floated to the surface. Ideas became rich, and a lot of very quiet, withheld people felt empowered, and afterwards said, that process alone made me feel so brave to participate in this large space. And so I've used that many times. I use that with retreats. If a company hires me to do their company retreat, and it's a large group, I use that to break all the ice. It's all the ice breaking. Like, it all shatters. And then and then what you do at the end, by the way, just to conclude, is you then empower everybody in the room to generate the questions to create the common ground. And they start asking the questions, and they own the entire space. And it's like for one of my mentors is Chris Corrigan, the Art of Hosting fellow here in town. And he long ago taught me, your job is to give everybody as many opportunities to be human as possible, and then get the hell out of the way and become a host. Clean up their dishes. Like, just get out of the way. Let them, once they find that momentum and the dialogue starts, get I get out of there. Like, just watch the clock, but go make sure the coffee's hot. I love that. That's so important to me.
Oh, I'm so excited about these ideas. Although the facilitator in my brain is going, okay, what about time?
Yeah.
So we've talked about space, and we've talked about trust and engagement. And what about time?
What about time? This is a great one. There's a few bad habits that I think I've noticed, Julie, that will happen when some momentum kind of takes over in a room and a group is starting to get into that collective momentum together. And one habit is to turn and look at the time or look at the watch and say, uh-oh, and actually in that moment give power to the time. And that to me is a very tangible act of letting the technical override the human, right? So I would say that if you go into a session, or I'm not going to give direct advice. I'm going to tell you what I do, and then whatever comes out that's useful. So what I do is I have the time I know that I have with a group. I never, ever, ever go over time. I always end a few minutes early just to respect that everybody needs to get where they need to get. I'll then put on the first slide, and I rarely have slides, so on the whiteboard or somewhere, just what the overriding topics are going to be. But I would say I never put an agenda that has time on it. Because when you put an agenda that has time on it, you're already telling the group what should happen.
That's right.
And I won't say you, I start saying, I've decided that this is what's important. So we've all come together around these topics. I've decided that this topic should have this amount of time, this topic should have this amount of time. And to me, that is a way for me to continue to very much center myself, keep control over the process. So I have this strategy that I use that does a boundary setting and a constraint setting around that space. I like to hold the space. People like to know that the person who is guiding them through an experience has a sense of navigation and where things are going, but I don't go down to the level of detailed control where I time block things. What I will be very, very, very clear about is at 2:15, no matter what we're doing, we're gonna take a break. I'm very, very controlled by the time that we need to take a break, because that's giving people a chance to do what they need to do with connecting with families or work or their bodies. But in terms of content, I follow where the group needs to go. Having said that, there at a certain point, I think it's okay to say, hey, the group is here and we're going really, really deep on this thing. I do spend like 60 hours a week thinking about this topic. And I know if we just move forward a little bit, there's this whole other cool thing that we can get to. Can you trust? I'm just going to shift us because there's this thing I see that you don't see yet. And if you're excited about this, wait till we get to that. Or if you feel like good work is happening here in the resolution space now, like there's this other thing that I want to get us to that's going to get. And then it's a negotiation of time, not a control of time.
Yeah, I call that the generous authority. It's
nice.
it's also on the back end of an event. If others, I will often say, okay, we're at time, and that's that. Would some of you like to stay behind and continue to do something else? I'm willing to stay for another half an hour, but it is over, and it's over, and you end it, and then you start a new thing afterwards. But the generous authority is what you're talking about, Kari, and I've seen you're very good. You're better at that than I will ever be. Mind you, you're fancy F-bomb dropping PhD. You're good like that. Yeah,
It's always
time's
those
big.
PhDs.
You got to watch those PhDs. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
who use words like the academy. Yeah, I know. I know.
I know. I have a friend that we call her Dr. Potty Mouth.
Dr. Potty.
That's Kari. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I love that. And I mean, and it's interesting for me as an Indigenous person because our sense of time, I mean, there's lots of jokes. You've heard the Indian time, and
Yep.
and sometimes it's used as a weapon to talk
Yep.
about, you know, not
Yep.
getting things done or not being
Yep.
timely or not respecting people's and it's really a much different thing in that, you know, things don't begin until the crucial people are ready for it. So readiness is a huge part of it. And, you know, and time is not, I mean, usually to my people, not a clock on the wall. It's the sun or the seasons and that getting to, you know, and especially this summer, I sat in a potlatch for a very, very long day. There was much business to be done. And it really reminded me of the patience necessary and to respect the speakers and to respect the business that needed to be done was a huge lesson in respect and patience for me, because I just wanted to run out of there and throw myself into the river because it was, you know, sweltering hot and
Been there, done that.
but recognizing, you know, that the business was there was still things to be done. There was still things to be said, and it's such a different world, and then to walk into sort of, you know, what I often think of as sort of the corporate world or the business world, where, you know, to be late to a meeting is you know, considered you know, rude or
Taboo,
you know,
yeah.
So I appreciate the sentiment around, you know, not control, like I mean, and the thing is we can never actually control time. It ticks on no matter what we're doing. But also treating it as that other dimension, or what assumptions are we making about this, about it, and what are the needs of the participants. And I find that with some groups around engagement, that's the other thing, is rushing through things often makes the distrust, if there's any, sort of fester and grow if we're trying to rush.
Yeah, Julie, that's really interesting. I actually want to pick up on one of those points. How do you find that? Because it is true. Like it's another one of those assumptions where we think there's what time means, showing up on time. We ascribe value to it, and then of course it activates all sorts of schemas depending on if people are early or late or what's going on with them. So how do you in your work, you know, perhaps try to grapple with that or mitigate some of those assumptions or provide that space for, you know, people to have different ways of being and needing different amounts of time?
I have a
Oh, you go.
Go,
Yeah.
Kari. No,
You've got a good one.
No, I
Not
do,
me?
but you
Okay.
go.
One of the things that I'll do is I will be very rigorous with myself in terms of what I want to be true and what I know to be true in terms of how long things take. Perfect example of this is lunch breaks. So you're running a whole day event. This is in particular, I'm speaking about in-person spaces here. And somebody shows you the, you know, event plan, and then you see 12 to 1 lunch. I'll look at that hour and I'll just say, no, like, is that really, that's only going to be 1 hour? Like part of what we will often do and when we're crafting an experience for a group is that we will put onto paper, in particular in boxes in an Excel spreadsheet or something, we will put onto paper what we want to happen in a set amount of time, but then not go through even an internal rehearsal of actually footstepping and walking through what a lived experience of that would be. And then if we draw on more universal design principles, it's principles of, you know, what if we were to have as the primary person moving through that schedule is not, it doesn't have the swiftest mobility or needs additional supports in terms of seeing or hearing particular things in the room. And so if we're rushing the completely great vision, can hear everything, able-bodied fit person like me, if I'm feeling rushed in the day, imagine what the ripple effect of that is for folks who are feeling like the world is rushing them all the time. So I off the bat almost always will cut 1/3 to half of any content I think I want to get through. And I'm ruthless with myself before I'm ruthless with my participants or my students, because then there genuinely is time for it to be all of us in the space together trying to grapple with something, and to actually have the community as the primary need, community building, meaning making, belonging, and then content comes secondary. So Mark and I were chatting about this yesterday, like why I feel a thought partnership with Mark, or just walked up to him and said, hey, I just want to know you better. And I think I also told you off about something.
You did.
So that was my first
That was
interaction
years
with
ago,
Mark.
though.
That was years ago.
I haven't clinged to that with a sense of bitterness and remorse. I'm fine. I'm over it. It was
But I saw in him that, like, what's primary for Mark, which to me feels very familiar, is the community connection is primary. The content is secondary.
Right.
And so if I do that, then time doesn't feel so dominant.
Right.
And then I'm starting to, I don't feel like every bit of information that I want to bestow or thing that we need to check off the boxes as precious.
Right.
Yeah. So Mark, I
I'm
cut
gonna-
you off. You build on.
I'm gonna add. This is perfect. We're perfect. I want to make sure that part of tonight is that we're giving also some tips and some things, some tools that people might go away and think about. Can I put this in gallery mode? Can I see hands up? How many of videos are off? Hands up, virtually or otherwise.
Tell you
How many? Hi, Katrina. How many people have heard of or used the framework of Socratic circles in your practice? Sharon.
I don't see. Oh, I see one.
Hannah, two
hand.
people. Okay,
Yep.
good. That's good. Okay, good. I just wanted to get a sense of that. Okay, so and I can share some resources on this. You can Google the heck out of it. With regard to time, and there was a question somewhere earlier I saw go by about, you know, how is time, how equitable, the equity of time, and you know, and then there's also this idea. It's related to what about those people who just don't speak or they're just not, or the guy who won't shut up.
Yeah,
and you know, like, and time gets all messed up, and then you have to, your gentle authority swings back to benevolent dictator, and you're like, I'm sorry, sir, you need to, and I have all kinds of tactics for that too. They're very effective. But first of all, I love to convince my partners that I'm supporting in this work that you know, I want to do Socratic circle. I'll explain what it is. It's 2 circles. The inner circle is going to have an open, unstructured dialogue that they self-manage. The outer circle is not allowed to speak a word. They must listen. They can write notes if they want, but they're witnesses. You know, people are like, why would we do this? Like, what are you talking about? And it's this idea, you know, Socrates was very big on this dialogue teaching format that by talking it through and getting people to, there's a collective genius and you will find the way forward. And so sometimes I'm dealing with really complex issues. I work in engagement, I work with corporate leadership, I work with different communities, and the time gets chewed up in gnarly ways if you don't bring some framework and some intention. And here's one of the tricks I've added to my Socratic circle. And it's been so long, I don't even remember who taught this to me, but I started a little diagram I'm going to show you. So everybody imagine that we have a room of us. There could be 20 of us, could be 40 of us, could be 400. Doesn't really matter that much. But we have an inner circle and an outer circle, approximately the same amount of people. There's a prompt, there's a meaning, there's a purpose. Kari has shared an incredibly powerful question to frame the dialogue, and we explain the rules. The outside circle understands. We don't speak. A version of this that's a very different version that you may have seen more used more frequently is called fishbowl, right? You put a few people in the middle, people can tap in and out. Only the people inside the fishbowl get to speak. Those of us on the outside get to look inside. They're similar. You can use this on both, but here's what I do to manage time, engage the unengaged, give permission and encouragement to the introverts who may not be speaking, and to tell that guy in the corner to shut the fuck up. There, I dropped a bomb. There you go. So I will unleash them. And I convince my partners, I need 45 minutes to an hour for this. I need time. This is going to take time. It may even go longer. And then I will stand over in the corner and I will have Kari, let's say, on the other side of the circle, writing down the themes that are emerging from this dialogue. And I will take my what are those called? Easels, the easel with my big thing. And I will have kind of discreetly drawn the circle, the inner circle of the conversation. And as the dialogue begins, I stand there, I do not explain this, and I start tracking the conversation around the circle. And I just keep drawing this thing as people reply and respond and reply, and people say things. And what happens, of course, is this guy will eventually notice, as should this guy or person, that they're doing all the talking. And this person, if it looks like this at the end, you know, as the time, and I will warn them, I will say, okay, we have 10 minutes more of this to go. They will have glanced over, and with no need to explain what's happening, they suddenly are putting their hand up going, yeah, I would like to respond to this earlier thing or whatever. And of course, I also, as a facilitator, will gently invite, we haven't heard from you, Kari, would you like to say something? Robin, you've been quiet. Before we end this, would you like to make a contribution? And that somehow brings time into play. It brings the dialogue back. It elevates a richness to the conversation. And of course, then when you switch the outer chairs to the inner and you do it again, hokey Dinah, do you have a conversation? Like, it is like informed and on fire. And by the time you go back to groupthink or break out into groups, you have a really fired up community, a large group that is deep in the work.
Mm-hmm.
Image, yeah, Lauren, image worth 1,000 words. It's funny because you know what I'll do? I'll break the first thing. I say, that's it. That was, whatever, 40 minutes. Now we're going to switch. By the way, does anybody want to explain what I'm doing over here? And they all understand. They're like, no, we got it. We got it. Oh, no, we got it. Thank you. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to continue, by the way. And then I will quietly do that for the next round.
Yeah.
Nancy Baker just asked a really good question directly to me. But Nancy, I'm going to say it out loud. Sorry to out you. You DM'd me. I shouldn't have said that. She wants to know, how does the inner circle get chosen? Excellent question. This is Facilitator Tricks 101. Totally by random, right? I'll do something like a paradigm, dog people over there, cat people over there, put yourself over here, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and I'll mix it up. And I make sure that, like partners and principals and break the cliques up, understand the group, and don't do that. But there is no priority sequence. Nobody gets chosen to be in the first. It's random. So anyway, thank you for that question. That's a really good one.
Thanks, Mark. I want to actually pick up, we've got some great comments that have been coming in as you've been talking in the chat.
Sure.
And if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And if we don't get time, still
we're down to 10 minutes already. I don't know how that happened.
But we will create more space and time by making sure that we take the questions away. They won't be lost, and we'll make sure that Mark and Kari get the questions.
Definitely.
But I see some really great comments about movement and how important that is. And I feel like a lot of what you've been talking about is, going back to that, that process design piece, going back to not everything the same, not coming in and saying, this is how it's going to be, as benevolent as you may be, not to be the benevolent dictator, and to really, make sure that you're crafting the process together, co-developing with the people you're going to be engaging with. And I see a question about, and I really like this, allowing space for humanity right off the bat, right at the outset. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that.
About creating space for humanity? Yeah. this this has been quite a time of reckoning and how we create space, especially just thinking about my full-time job is to create space and bring people into some kind of process where they're learning together. And the last few years has been very both dehumanizing and humanizing at the same time. I try to feel the genuine moments of fear or gratitude when I'm actually in spaces with people, and to give my students in particular, because they're often younger than me, I'm grading them. Like there's classrooms are not, I think educators like to think that their work is always like very touchy-feely, but I think it's, as we know, classrooms can be real spaces of violence and of fear, and they can be really terrifying spaces for many people, especially many of us who didn't feel like we belonged in some way, or were neurodivergent, or we were othered. So a way that I bring the humanity in is to actually say how grateful I am if we're in a classroom and things are working well, to really notice together when things are working well, to really use asset-based language, appreciative inquiry approaches, to really pause and just have what I think of as like, I see you moments, or I see us moments, like, look at this thing we created, or look at this, like, oh, this group is just wow. And just noticing when things are really working well with a genuine gratitude, and also a genuine gratitude for being in a space where the output is not to make money together, to sell things together. The output is relationship building and knowledge creation. And maybe that's something all of us in this room share. We're like, yeah, the output, the bottom line of our work is relational. And so it is woven into everything we do in our work is humanity and the human condition, and how resilience is relationship and learning is always collaborative. And like one of the first required readings in my MBA creativity class is an article about how researcher who studies forest systems at UBC has finding the mother tree has completely really upended in alongside colleagues and Indigenous colleagues, that forests are not in competition with each other, of course, that they're actually deeply collaborative systems. And that becomes a metaphor, and that becomes a required reading in my class, so that we know that we're meant to be connecting with each other. So I guess that's you kind of touched nerve there, because I just feel so grateful that we have work that is of service to belonging, gathering, coming together, healing, navigating conflict, which I kind of make a joke, like, we talk about the love of learning. It's not the love of learning, it's the love of having learned. Like, we talk about the aha moment. I don't see aha moments. I see moments. Like, that's what learning looks like. Learning is an moment. Like, it sucks and it's horrible and it hurts and it's hard. And then we get through it to the end. And the other world I love, which is theater, it's all conflict, everything in conflict. Everything in theater is conflict. And so to me, that's just like the heart of the human condition, is the work that all of us in this room share, I think.
I'm going to, we're heading to the finish line here, and I feel compelled to lift on that. One of the projects, I love that we don't have enough time for Kari and I to talk about all the cool things we do. You can find us, go find us. We come to the next Creative Mornings if you want, and it'll blow your mind.
Drop a link.
You can come virtually. You don't need to be in the room. You're welcome. You'll get free breakfast, but you can come virtually. There's live music. You will not be disappointed. However, to tie a few things together here, the coming back, pretending the pandemic is over is foolish, and to coming back in person one thing that we have learned, Kari and I are convinced of, is that the lessons we've learned from this digital experience need to come back into the shared in-person experience. For us, that has meant hybridizing a lot of what we do. And what it also has taught us is that the intention and the meaning and the purpose and the deep love that drives why we do what we do needs to be articulated, repeated, clarified, embraced, and made sure that the exclusion, sometimes, I say this often, it is as much about who is not included as who you invite into that space when you're creating space, and that's crucial. I'll give you one example. I'll give you two examples. One is we do not take sponsorship, period. And we were the first chapter in global. There's 227 chapters around the world, cities around the world that do creative mornings. Ours is the best. Well, New York's pretty cool. But we insisted on a couple of things. One, it had to be dialogic. If the audience wasn't included and there wasn't an interactive, engaged, participatory element, we were out. So, oh, okay, do it that way. So that's what we did. Secondly, we weren't interested in even the word sponsor. And this tonight is about reimagining space, reimagining community. It's about creativity. And so for us, it was like, what if every time an organization came to us and said, can I sponsor? What do I get? If I give you the money, what do I get? We found a way to come back to them and say, unless you're willing to stop using that word, which is transactional, and join us in a like-minded embrace of the value of contributing to connection and conversation and exploring creativity, yeah, we're going to increase the capacity of the creative community. That is a lot of C words. But if that isn't enough for you, and you generously are willing to part with some of your resources, money, and join us as a partner to figure out how to shape this, then we're not interested. We're not going to give you your tax receipts and how many times you get to email our mailing list. And so it was a rethink. And it's so many times I've delighted over the last 12 years where people are like, oh, well, so you don't have a sponsorship kit for us? Oh, well, then I'm whatever. And then they come back like, okay, I talked to my boss. We totally screwed up. We want to be a part of this. And then the other thing is the meaning and the purpose. Every time we gather with that group, Kari, could you pull the manifesto? Could you Google Creative Mornings Manifesto? It's on our website somewhere. We read out why we gather to the group. We remind them right at the beginning that this, and if you want people to be snap into being engaged and you own them and it's human, read them this. I'll read it quickly to you. Everyone is creative. A creative life requires bravery and action, honesty and hard work. We are here to support you, celebrate with you, and encourage you to make the things you love. We believe in the power of community. We believe in giving a damn. We believe in face-to-face connections, in learning from others, in hugs and high fives. We bring people together who are driven by passion and purpose, confident that they will inspire one another and inspire change in neighborhoods and cities around the world. Everyone is invited. Our events are always free. You always get a meal. It's an extraordinary way to frame gathering. And I think there's a lesson in there for all of us that, oh my gosh, I can come to every single time I think of the space that I'm going to put people into and what container does that look like? Make it a container of love. It'll humanize everybody. Everybody will show up better.
I love that, Mark. That's great. And I think you have to draw on sadly, my inner Kari here and say, I can't believe it, but that is unfortunately all of our time. But what a great note to finish on. And hopefully, of course, we here are in a shared virtual space. We're also part of different communities and a community together. And thank you so much for the tangible pieces of wisdom that you shared, the stories that you shared, some of your ideas. And I know that we're all going to, go away and think a little bit differently about how we want to, be as humans and be in this space together.
And Robin, I'm sorry, but I'm going to jump in and make sure I want to say something quickly too. And my apologies. It's very hard when we're in here. And I appreciate you adding your final thoughts there and everybody sharing. Thank you so much to everybody. I simply want to jump in because I want to invite everybody to continue the conversation. Mark has already invited you to share more in the chat, to engage in different ways, to show up at different spaces to continue the chat, this discussion directly. I also want to acknowledge that a number of people here are people who are going to be speaking about topics that we're talking about tomorrow at our conference. It's still possible to join the conference if you're not already registered, and Darcy's going to throw a link into the chat as well. So if you want to have more conversations about reimagining spaces, that's one opportunity. The second opportunity to do so is to join us on Friday morning, and I want to extend an invitation to everybody. Tomorrow is the CLEBC conference, so all day we'll be spending time talking about reimagining spaces, and we have a range of people talking about really, really interesting different approaches to that theme. On Friday, we have the Center for Good Relations, which is a mediation group out of Glasgow, who are going to be sharing their learnings around mediating in protest and demonstration, and that will be a workshop. That anybody is, please let us know. Please simply send a note to us, and we'll make sure that you're able to participate in that workshop in order to have more conversations about that. So I'm sorry to do the advertising at the end, but I feel it's really important to invite the continuing conversation and to make sure that people do know there are opportunities to carry this on. And with that, I really want to say, Mark and Kari, that was incredibly inspiring. And I will track what was in the chat and make sure we're passing on everything that are questions. And for folks, if you don't know, you can definitely save the chat. It's set up to do that. If you want to save those resources, we'll stay online for a few minutes to allow you to do that, to capture anything that you want to take away from this session, because absolutely we've had some fantastic comments here from folks, and lots of shared resources. So thank you to everybody for their generosity, their time, their engagement, and their focus tonight. And Mark and Kari, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. I just
Pleasure.
you'll notice that I've just changed my name. So one thing I wanted to share for inclusivity for your question, Julie, and I forgot to share it, was you can rename yourself in Zoom. So I ask everybody at the beginning of Zoom sessions often to rename themselves and spell their name phonetically, and so that's how you say my name, Kari. And then I ask folks to put next to their name 2 items that if they were turned into an action figure and sold across the land to young people because they're so awesome and inspiring, what 2 accessories would be in the toy box with them that are their like accessories that give them their life force. And I've seen everything from like apple pie and sledgehammer to, my grandmother's watch. And but this is just also a very practical tool to ensure people's names are being pronounced properly, and that we're saying people's names. And so sometimes I'll have somebody, Michael will say, well, everybody knows how to pronounce my name. And I'll say, no, they don't, Michael, you got to write it phonetically. So it's everybody does it. And then it's a way to ensure that we can say each other's name. So that's just one final little Zoom trick.
We have 28 more.
Yeah. Lovely to meet everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all. And I'll remind those who are recording with me that we can stop recording now.